Hey gang, Scott Davenport here. Before I dive into today's topic on culling really quickly, I have launched a Patreon site, so if you're enjoying my videos, want to support my work, check out the link below, and hopefully you'll make a pledge, and pledges will really help keep this channel going, as well as feed into some exclusive stuff over on Patreon just for members only. Now let's talk about culling. Where did this topic come from? I was trading some emails with Joel, who joined me in Big Sur for workshop. This was in May of 2019. And it's asking the question about what do you do when you've whittled down to a set of photos that are largely similar? How do you pick the one to really start working on? And this is something that comes up a lot in my seascapes work because we choose a composition. The ocean is changing with each photo, and so we tend to have a set of a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen photos of basically the same thing. They're all slightly different. What do we look for? So I was doing a shoot just yesterday, as it were. And I've just imported them all into Lightroom. I thought I might as well just flip on the video camera. Let's record this thing. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly and show you, what are the things that I'm looking for when I'm deciding this one I'll process, this one I'll reject, or this one will just kind of sit around the library and maybe disappear over the course of time. For some context, my workflow, the initial pass is I do some type of rating, and I use a 1 to 5 star system. In practice, it ends up being like either 3 stars or 4 stars. 3 is something I want to keep and hold on to. 4 is something I want to work on. And anything else, 5 star would be usually after I've processed. 2 star I'll keep for educational purposes. Here's an example of what not to do kind of stuff. Ones don't really factor into it, quite honestly. If you're really curious about my full workflow, I've got a video course all about what I do in Lightroom. But I will bring these guys up in full screen mode. And so we can see as I just quickly go through this, I'm just going to use the right arrow key, move through here. Matter of fact, let's bring up the film strip so we have an idea of where we are, just to see what's going on. So, I'm working the composition, I'm fine-tuning things, and then finally, started to settle in. So scrolling back to the front, these first few, I already know they're not going to be shots I'm going to work on. These were compositional test shots, so I could take a photo, take a few, look at them on the camera while I'm in the field, and then decide where I really wanted to set up. In practice, I wouldn't even have brought these into Lightroom. Now this is about where I settled on the composition. I know I don't like this particular sea wall that's here, so when I composed, I was already mentally cropping at this point. So I'm kind of ignoring what's going on here. From this point forward, I'm doing a couple of things. For the stationary elements, things that are fixed, we've got these rocks coming through here, this foreground rock, and then really the sky, the horizon line, all of this stuff is not going to change much at all shot to shot. The rocks will look a little different depending on what the ocean does. And when I was framing this up, I wanted to make sure I was getting a nice sweep of water to cover some of this foreground rock. I'm going to zoom in really quickly and check focus. It looks good. I know I'd set focus and I was good to go. So for the rest of this pass here, I'll skip the few that are just of me and my tripod and start in like right around here. This is where I started to really pay attention to what's the ocean doing. Water's too choppy. Don't particularly like it. For now, I'll throw a 2 on it. This was an example of HDR because HDR does not work well at the ocean. I'm using that for a different video project. So again, still fine-tuning the test shots here. Now we're getting into the filters, right? So this is the ones I'm really starting to pay attention to. For my HDRs, I should do this. Since I'm doing this and I don't want to go back and revisit it, those are 2s. This one I'm going to reject, X key, and now here we are. My hand is going to be hovering over the 3 and the 4 key. I'm looking at 3, yeah, I like the shot. 4, I don't. I really like the shot. I want to work on it. And then if I'll reject it outright. So this is, this is a 3. This is a 3. It's a little messy. This one I don't like at all. There's just too much chop in the water. X. Now this one, there's too much covering the foreground, so that's a problem. Although I can see just this segment of the photo being like its own shot. If I were to zoom in just for a second, that's a little bit too far. And think about framing this in the sense that we're just concentrating on the ocean. So that might become something that I could use. So I'll keep a 3 on it. That one's good. 4. I got nice sweeps of water here. These lines are nice. The rocks are visible, and everything else, the fixed stuff, I'm paying less attention to. That one's pretty good as well. Hit a 4 on that one. 3, 4. Nice action going on there. And really, as I'm going through these, I'm paying attention to what the water is doing, what the waves are doing. I like that one. This one's a little bit too empty on the right-hand side. That one's cool. That one's good. Not enough happening on the right-hand side. Not bad, but not really jumping out at me. That one's pretty much not working at all. We'll take an X on that. 3. Too much in the foreground. Too much in the foreground. Too messy. Maybe something on that. 3. That's really not much different than the previous one, so I'll reject it. 3. No. Not bad. Actually, it's interesting to see it all filled in over there. Don't like that. And I'm through the set. So let me go back to the grid view mode now. We'll bring up the attributes. And I'm just interested in looking at the 3-star and higher photos. So how many do I have here? Ended up with 19. All right, of those, now let's really just focus on, what did I say were the 4 stars? I got 6 left. So from here, what's the last step I'm doing? I'll look at these 6. These are the ones that really matter to me and decide which one of these am I really, really going to work on. And so the next pass for just these remaining 6 is I'm much more paying attention to what's the water doing and how much of these rocks are showing. This is a little more art than science, I suppose. Of these 2, I like seeing more of this rock in the background. So I'm kind of skimming through the rest of them and see if I have a photo that captures all of that. This one right here is really good for the rocks. What about the sweep of water in the front? I'm going through the same set again. I actually kind of like this one a little bit more. There's some cool patterns on these rocks. I wish they were a little more visible. That one's not bad either. So I'm kind of between this photo and this photo. And so let's take a look at this one here too. The sky, and now I'm paying attention to the secondary elements. So I'm between these 3 that I'm moving back and forth on the film strip. So let's demote these others to 3 stars. So they're still in my library. They're just not visible now. And now what I'm looking at is what's going on in the secondary elements. Anything out over here. This was a really flat day of surf, so there's just a lot of dead here. But also watching the sky as there are subtle changes in the light. And that's really nice for the sky. The ocean's pleasing. That's pretty darn nice for the sky too. But I think of all 3 of them, this one in the center feels the most balanced overall. I got nice rocks. They're all poking and peeking out of the water. There's nice wave action here. Good stuff on the foreground. And because there's some, like this foam that's cutting out here, it's filling in this midground. The sky's very nice, but compare that to, say, this photo here. It's a little bit empty here. As much as I like the action that's going on the rocks and this foreground piece, this feels a little bit empty. It's a little bit darker. And then looking at the other one, this area feels empty, losing a bit of the rocks there. I do like this sweep and the bit of beach, but all said and done, this is the photo I'm going to work on from here. So what would happen next is I'd take most of these photos through the rest of my metadata workflow, adding the location tags from a GPX track log and adding keywords to my 4-star photos. I don't have to add keywords to everything. That's just a waste of time. For these ones, it's kind of copy paste, so there's little time spent doing that. And then I'd finally get into processing. But that's the culling part of it. And so maybe summing it up to try to figure out, what's an approach to it is, throwing out the obvious things, right? If you have a photo that's out of focus or the composition just doesn't feel right, it's not balanced, and just get rid of it, just drop it. I usually do that during import, so even in the import screen, before I even hit the button to let Lightroom go ahead and create everything, I'll take a quick pass through, and if I see photos that are obviously bad, just don't even bother taking them any further. From there, looking at the overall just feel and a quick impression. You saw me go through that, maybe spending 2 or 3 seconds looking at each photo. And I'm not deleting anything other than ones I just feel are completely not usable. But so they're still in my library. And then paying attention to the details. The fixed elements kind of anchor the composition, and then the moving elements or things that have some variation photo to photo. Just pay attention to those. Look at the secondary elements. In this case, in this scene, it was the sky and the background, and seeing what's going on that's nice up in here, what's going on in this mid-ground area, and keeping in mind I'm just using stars to kind of percolate things up to the top. If I ever need to go back and grab something else, maybe I need to do a composite because there's an interesting sky from a different photo. All those options are still there. But that's the culling process. Hope you found this interesting. Joel, I hope this gives you even another vantage on the culling process that we were talking about through email. And that's going to do it for the video. So until next time, my name's Scott Davenport. Happy shooting.